Hi, this is Hyve Synth by Scott Weedman. It doesn't have a filter or any effects, which is why I'm running it through external ones. But it does have 60 oscillators, stereo touch detection, and effectively as many VCAs as you have fingers. In this video, I'll take a look at its extremely interesting architecture, the pros and cons of this design, and of course why that beehive layout makes it so special. Let's get started. Before we dive in, just a bit of background. Hyve Synth was initially built in workshops with its designer, Scott Weedman, and later offered both as a DIY kit and as a finished product in a wooden enclosure and a carrying case as part of a successful Kickstarter campaign. It comes with this 9-volt battery case and can be powered by an external power supply as well. Its internal design is super simple, but also extremely clever. It has 12 core analog oscillators, tuned chromatically apart, but they can be tuned up to an octave up or down. And then each oscillator has 4 additional sub-oscillators. So this one has 4 more for a total of 5 octaves. So 12 core oscillators with 4 additional sub-oscillators for each means 60 different notes playable at a time, 60 different oscillators at a time. So if you wanted, you could literally play them all. So just to explain this point, before we get to the top grid and some other things, when you're playing up a scale, it's not the same oscillator that's playing different notes. It's actually a different oscillator for each note. So it's sort of like a piano where each key has its own string. Let's talk about the surface. Hyve Synth's entire top layer is a network of capacitive touch sensors. Your fingers behave sort of like VCAs here. For example, one side of your finger may conduct better than the other side and play lower. If you put hand lotion on your fingers or say lick them, like this one, you'll see a big difference between this note and this note. Right? Because this one is more conductive. The surface is so sensitive to humidity that if you blow on it, notes will ring out for a while. And I've got this straw here, and I'll give you an example. The notes will ring out for as long as the surface is humid. And if I wipe it down, it will evaporate quicker. One thing I noticed that if my fingers are extremely dry and the sound level becomes very low, as you increase the overall gain of the signal, you'll hear a faint background hum, which sounds a little like all the notes playing together. You can just barely make it out. You can look at this as a gritty character, or just make sure your hands are humid enough to make the signal louder either with hand lotion or the sweaty excitement of live performance. Okay, let's talk about the layout, because obviously there's something different going on here compared to a regular keyboard. Even the bottom half is quite special, despite the fact that it looks like a regular piano keyboard. Because it contains 5 octaves per row or per note, you can actually play inverted chords or chords spread out across multiple octaves quite easily, something that you wouldn't be able to do with one hand, perhaps even 2. The bottom pads are pitch bends. Each pitch bend applies to all 5 notes above it. So that's the bottom portion. Let's talk about this hexagon beehive grid on top, which is where the Hyve name comes from. Each separate pad here is connected to the same oscillators that these keys are connected to, but obviously this is arranged in a very different way. These little dots are cues to help you find your way around. So this represents C, and then these dots represent a C as well. This black dot on F sharp means that every black dot pressed here will be an F sharp. Now the notes here are arranged this way. As you travel up, you're going fifths higher. Travel in this direction, it's major thirds. And travel in diagonal this way or the other way, it's minor thirds. So 7 semitones going up, 4 semitones going up and to the right, and then 3 semitones going up and to the left, and of course down as well, down to the right as well. If you go straight to the right or to the left, you're going semitones up. Now, this is a little bit confusing to begin with, and there's this cardboard cheat sheet that comes with the Hyve Synth to get you started, but overall it makes a lot of sense musically. And it also has some advantages compared to the regular keyboard we're all used to. The first is just traveling in any direction is much more musical than just traveling semitones up and down. The second reason this is cool is that you can create chords with one finger. So for example, a C major triad chord is C, E, and G, which is a major third up and a minor third up. So if we go in the major third direction from C, and then in the minor third direction, and just hold basically the top right corner above the C note, we get a C major chord. A C minor chord is just going the other way, or holding the top left corner. Major seventh is holding these 4 notes, and minor seventh is holding these 4 notes. And the flatter you lay your finger, the jazzier the chords get. The third cool thing about the Hyve layout is that it's isomorphic, which means that once you learn a chord shape or a melodic sequence, it applies to any note you pick as a starting point. So just like these 3 notes are a C major chord, if we have our F sharp right here, that's an F sharp major, and you guessed it, F sharp minor. Or for example, once you learn the pattern for a major scale, which is going in and out in this diagonal pattern, you'll get a major scale using the same pattern no matter which note you start with. The last really nice thing about the Hyve Synth, and you may have noticed this, is that it's stereophonic. Now, you have the best control on this bottom row. Notice if you have headphones on, as I press on the right of G here, you should be hearing it in your right ear, and on the left, you should be hearing it on the left ear. And this applies not just to the notes here, but to any of the notes on the grid or on this pattern here. Now, it's much harder to control left and right in this relatively small space, and certainly here. But the nice thing is that you can use it to apply a sort of tremolo, stereo tremolo for each note. And because it's stereo, you can split left to right and have it go through different signal chains. Now here I've got it on a modular effects setup, but you can obviously use non-modular effects for it as well. So the way I've got this set up is first going through a filter, which I can choose to apply with or without resonance. And this is a stereo filter, which is all that little bit cooler. Then after the filter, I'm passing the left side straight to the reverb, but the right side is going through the distortion effect right here. So right now, left and right are more or less the same, but as I increase distortion, right, there's a substantial difference between going left and right. And if I add a little reverb to that, this chain of filter into distortion and then into the reverb, I think sounds quite special. I also have an LFO modulating the filter frequency. I can turn that off. Let's hear what that sounds like. The pads here also give the sound a pretty sharp attack and decay, so reverb is a nice way to give the sound both a gentle attack and a gentle decay as you move to the wetter side of the dry-wet mix. So to summarize, on the pros side, Hyve Synth is a super portable, extremely unique, very musical polyphonic synth. I'm a big believer in unique note layouts as a gateway to musical experimentation, and the fact that you have 5 octaves immediately accessible both in a traditional layout and isomorphic one means you don't have to choose, you get the best of both worlds. On the cons side, if you're expecting this to behave like a regular synth where you hit a key and it always sounds the same, it won't exactly do that. The humidity in your fingers matters, as does their placement and pressure. It also doesn't have MIDI or CV in or out. You are quite literally an organic part of the circuit. It also makes one type of sound, one waveform, sort of sounds kind of like an accordion or harmonica, but as you heard before, it's quite malleable with filtering and effects. So that's pretty much it. If you like this style of videos, make sure to ring the notification bell after you subscribe, hit like if this was useful, and also consider checking out my book of electronic music ideas, tips, and tricks available to people who support this channel on Patreon. Thanks very much for watching.